Captain Kim Tae-ho stared at the glowing screen in front of him. The numbers made no sense at all. His ship, the New Seoul, was 3 days out from the mining station when the signal came through. It was weak and broken like an old radio trying to reach through a storm, but there was something about it that made his heart beat faster. Signal carried human DNA markers that should have been normal, except these markers were impossible. They showed a date that was over 3,000 years. Old Tae-ho had been mining asteroids for 15 years, and he had never seen anything like this spark. Sora looked up from her engine controls. She was the best engineer on his crew, and right now her face showed the same confusion he felt. Her black hair was tied back and oil stained her blue work clothes. She had been working on the engines when the signal came through. Doctor, what do you think about this? Tae-ho asked, turning to Dr. Lee Jae-min, who sat at the medical station. The doctor was young but very smart. He had joined their crew only 6 months ago, but already proved himself many times. Dr. Lee frowned at his readings. The DNA patterns are definitely human, but they are older than our entire civilization. The dates show these people went into deep sleep before we even had space travel. How is that possible? Security Chief Choi Dong-wook stood near the weapons control. His thick arms were crossed and his face looked worried. Captain, this could be a trap. We should call for backup before we investigate. Ho understood his concern. The deep space between stars was dangerous. Many ships had disappeared out here without any trace. But something about this signal felt different. It felt like someone was calling for help after waiting for a very long time. The signal is getting stronger, Sora said, checking her instruments. We are getting close to whatever is sending it through. The main window, they could see empty space filled with distant stars. Then slowly a shape appeared. In the darkness, it was huge, much bigger than their mining ship. The object was built into a massive asteroid, but it was clearly made by humans. The metal and glass structures looked familiar yet strange. At the same time, the technology looks advanced. Tae-ho said, studying the readings, much more advanced than anything we have. The structure had lights that still worked after all these years. Power readings showed that some systems were still active. Something or someone was still alive inside that ancient station. Captain, we are receiving a docking signal, Sora announced. The station is guiding us to a landing. Dong-wook shook his head. This feels wrong. Why would an abandoned station still have working docking systems? Because it is not abandoned. Dr. Lee said quietly, looking at these readings. Someone is definitely still alive in there. Tae-ho made his decision. Dock us with the station, but keep the engines ready. We might need to leave quickly. The docking process was smooth. The ancient station seemed to know exactly how to handle their modern ship. The landing bay sealed around them, and air filled the space between the ships. Dong-wook checked his weapons. Sora gathered her tools, and Dr. Lee packed his medical kit together. The four of them walked through the airlock into the ancient station. The inside took their breath away. The walls were made of materials they had never seen before. Everything glowed with a soft blue light. The air was clean and warm, perfect for humans even after thousands of years. This place is incredible, Sora whispered, running her hands along the smooth walls. The technology here is beyond anything we know. They walked through long hallways filled with strange machines. Some were clearly computers, but they looked nothing like modern designs. Others seemed to be weapons or medical equipment. Everything was built on a scale much larger than current human stations. Dr. Lee stopped at a control panel. The symbols on it were human, but in a language he did not recognize. Still, somehow the meaning felt familiar, like a half-remembered dream. Then they heard it, a low humming sound coming from deeper in the station. It was rhythmic like a heartbeat. The sound led them through more corridors until they reached a massive room. The room was filled with thousands of metal pods. Most were dark and empty. But in the center of the room, one pod still glowed with active power. Systems around it beeped and flashed, showing that whatever was inside was still alive. Dong-wook raised his weapon. This could be dangerous, Captain, but Tae-ho felt no fear as he approached the active pod. Through the clear window, he could see a woman inside. She looked young, maybe 25 years old. Her black hair floated around her face, and her breathing was slow and steady. The pod has been active for exactly 3,127 years. Dr. Lee read from the display. This woman has been sleeping since before our civilization began. How is that possible? Sora asked, but even as she asked the question, she was already working on the pod controls. The ancient technology responded to her touch as if it wanted to be opened. The pod began to open with a soft hiss. Warm air flowed out carrying a strange, sweet smell. The woman inside took a deeper breath, and her eyes opened slowly. They were brown and kind, but filled with tears. Sat up slowly and looked directly at Teho. Her face lit up with joy and relief, as if she was seeing an old friend after a long separation. Then she spoke words that changed everything. "You kept your promise," she said, with a voice full of emotion. "I knew humanity would come back for us. I knew you would not forget." Aho stepped back in fusion. "I am sorry. But I have never met you before." "Who are you?" Woman climbed out of the pod and stood before them. She wore clothes made of materials they had never seen, but her movements were graceful and sure. "My name is Han Yujin," she said. "I have been waiting for you to return from where?" Teho asked, his mind racing. "From the great journey back to the stars," Yujin said, looking at each of them in turn. "You promised me that humanity would grow strong again, that we would come back and wake up our people when the time was right." "I think there has been some mistake," Dr. Lee said gently. "We have never been here before. Our people have only had space travel for about 200 years." Yujin looked confused for a moment, then her expression became sad but understanding. "Of course," she said softly, "the memory transfer was not perfect. You do not remember yet." "What memory transfer?" Sora asked. Yujin walked to a control panel and touched it. The room around them came alive with holographic displays showing star maps and technical readouts. Information flowed across the screens too fast for them to understand. 3,000 years ago, she explained, humanity had an empire that covered 1,000 worlds. We had technology that could reshape matter, create artificial gravity, and transfer consciousness between bodies. But then the Devourers came. "What are Devourers?" Dongwook demanded. "Machines that consumed entire star systems," Yujin said with fear in her voice. "They were relentless and intelligent. They forced us to abandon everything and flee to primitive worlds like Earth." She turned back to Teho. "You were Admiral Kim, Teho, commander of the last human fleet. You promised me that when humanity was ready, you would return to wake us up and continue the fight." "But I'm just a mining ship captain," Teho protested. "I am not an admiral. I have never fought any war." Yujin smiled sadly. "The memories are buried deep, but they are there. You carry the genetic markers of the ancient bloodlines. That is why the station responded to your ship. That is why you felt compelled to come here." The room fell silent as they all tried to process what she was telling them. Finally, Dr. Lee spoke. "What happened to your people? Where is everyone else?" "Most of the pods failed over the centuries," Yujin said, looking at the dark pods around them. "I am the only one left from this station. But there are other stations scattered across the galaxy, all waiting for the signal to wake up." "What signal?" Sora asked. "The signal that means humanity is ready to reclaim the stars." Yujin looked at Teho with hope shining in her eyes. "The signal that you came here to give." But as she spoke, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Red lights flashed and the displays showed movement in the deep space around them. "They know we are here," Yujin said with growing fear. "The Devourers have been waiting for humans to return to space. They felt your ship arrive on the screens. They could see massive shapes moving between the stars, dark objects that blocked out starlight. As they passed, the ancient enemy was waking up, and they remembered the scent of humanity." Taho felt something stirring deep in his mind, like memories that belonged to someone else, memories of battles fought among the stars and promises made in desperate times. Yujin gripped his arm. "The promise was that humanity would return stronger," she said. "Please tell me we kept our word." Yujin walked to another control panel, and her fingers moved across it like she had done this 1,000 times before. The ancient systems responded instantly, and the room filled with three-dimensional images of star systems and planets. These were the worlds of the first human empire, she explained, pointing to glowing dots scattered across the display. Over 1,000 colonies, each one home to millions of people. We had ships that could cross the galaxy in days and cities that floated in. Spacesora stared at the images with wide eyes. The technology shown in the displays was far beyond anything their current civilization could imagine. Ships the size of moons, weapons that could crack planets, and machines that built new worlds from nothing but space dust. "This is impossible," Dr. Lee said, shaking his head. "Our history books say humans only left Earth 200 years ago. There is no record of any ancient empire." Yujin touched another control, and the images changed to show massive Factories in space and fleets of ships that stretched from horizon to horizon your people forgot because they had to, she said sadly. When the devourers came, we had to choose between remembering and surviving. What do you mean? Teho asked, but even as he spoke, he felt strange images flickering in his mind, memories that did not belong to him. The survivors who escaped to primitive worlds had their memories altered, Eugen explained. It was the only way to hide from the devourers. The machines could track human thoughts and technology, so your ancestors chose to forget everything and start over. Dong Wook kept his weapon ready, but his expression showed he was starting to believe. This is why we have no records of advanced technology in our past. Our ancestors deliberately erased it. Eugen nodded and activated another system. The room around them changed, showing a medical bay with equipment that made Li gasp in amazement. The machines here could cure any disease, extend human life for centuries, and even transfer consciousness between bodies. Li approached one of the medical scanners, and it activated, automatically scanning his body instantly. The display showed his complete genetic makeup in ways that their modern medicine could never achieve. The machine highlighted several unusual markers in his DNA. You all carry the bloodlines of the ancient empire, Eugen said, reading the scanner results. That is why you were drawn to this signal. That is why the station systems respond to Yusara was examining the engineering displays, and her excitement was obvious. These power systems could run our entire mining colony for 1,000 years, she said. And look at these ship designs. They could travel between galaxies. But Eugen's face grew dark as she activated the defensive systems. The station sensors showed the space around them, and what they revealed made everyone freeze. Massive shapes were moving in the darkness between stars. Each one was the size of a small moon, and they were coming closer. The devourers, Eugen whispered. They have been dormant in the deep void, waiting for humans to develop space travel again. Every ship that ventures far from Earth sends signals. They can detect how many of them are there. Teho asked, though he was not sure. He wanted to know the answer. Eugen checked the long-range sensors. Thousands, she said. Her voice was barely audible. Maybe tens of thousands. They have been building their strength while waiting for humanity to return to space. Li was still studying his genetic scan. The unusual markers in his DNA were glowing brighter. Now, Captain, he said, your genetic markers are much stronger than ours. The scanner is showing patterns I have never seen before. Eugen looked at Teho with growing excitement. She activated a different type of scanner, one that examined brain patterns instead of genetics. When the results appeared, her eyes filled with tears of joy. You are him, she breathed. You carry the complete memory engrams of Admiral Kim. Teho, the genetic locks are still intact. What does that mean? Sora asked. It means the memories are still there, Eugen explained. They are buried deep in his mind, waiting for the right trigger to unlock them. The Admiral encoded his consciousness into genetic markers before the final battle. Teho felt a cold chill run down his spine. I am not an admiral. I am just a mining captain. I have never commanded a fleet or fought in any war. The memories will return when you are ready, Eugen said, touching his arm gently. The genetic locks will only open when humanity needs the Admiral knowledge again. She turned to the tactical displays showing the approaching devourer ships, and the time is now, she added. The displays showed more detail about the enemy ships. They were not built like normal spacecraft, but seemed to grow like living things. Their surfaces writhed and changed shape as they moved, and smaller ships butted off from the larger ones like fruit from a tree. They consume everything they touch, Eugen explained. Metal, plastic, organic matter, energy. Everything becomes part of their collective mass. They grow stronger with every system they divorce. Ra studied the enemy ships with professional interest. But they are still machines, right? They must have weaknesses we can exploit. Eugen activated historical records showing the ancient war. The displays filled with images of space battles on an unimaginable scale. Human fleets numbering in the millions, fighting against the endless swarms of devourer ships. We tried everything, she said, pointing to different battle scenes. Weapons that could destroy stars, shields that could protect entire solar system, ships that could phase through solid matter. Nothing stopped them. Then how did humanity survive? Li asked. We ran, Eugen said simply. The survivors scattered to primitive worlds in the outer rim, places so far from civilization that the devourers would never think to look. We abandoned our technology and lived like our ancestors did thousands of years ago. The station shuddered as something large passed nearby. The sensors showed a Devourer scout ship investigating the area. Its surface was covered with sensors and weapon ports, and it was scanning everything around the station. They know we are here, Dong-wook said, checking his weapons, but he knew their small arms would be useless against something that Saizio-jin was working frantically at the control panels. The station defenses are still active, she said, but they have been dormant for 3,000 years. I'm not sure how much power they have left. Scout ship moved closer to the station and suddenly fired a beam of energy at their hull. The station shields activated, automatically deflecting the attack, but the power readings dropped significantly. We cannot take many hits like that, Sora said, studying the power system. Sujin managed to activate one of the station weapon systems. A massive energy cannon emerged from the asteroid surface and fired at the scout ship. The beam cut through the enemy vessel like it was made of paper, and the Devourer ship exploded in brilliant light. But even as they celebrated their victory, the long-range sensors showed more bad news. The destruction of the scout ship had sent a signal to the main Devourer fleet. Now they knew exactly where the station was located. They are coming, Yujin said, watching the sensor displays. The entire fleet is moving toward us. We have maybe 6 hours before they arrived. Taiho felt something stirring in his mind again. He saw flashes of memories that were not his own, commanding vast fleets, making desperate tactical decisions, and most clearly a promise made to a woman who looked exactly like Eugenie. Remember something, he said slowly. There was a promise. Something about returning when humanity was strong enough. Eugene gripped his hands. The promise was that you would come back for us. When humanity had grown strong enough to face the Devourers again, you would return and wake the sleeping colonies. But what if we are not strong enough? Tahoe asked. What if we are making the same mistake our ancestors made? Then we will have to make sure we are different this time, Eugene said firmly. The station database contains everything: knowledge about Devourer weaknesses, battle tactics, and most importantly, the locations of other sleeping human colonies. She activated a galactic map showing thousands of points of light scattered across the galaxy. Each point represented a hidden human colony still in cryosleep, waiting for the signal to wake up. If we can wake them all, we will have the numbers to fight, Yujin said, but we need someone with the authority to send the awakening signal, someone with the genetic codes of the ancient Admiralty. All eyes turned to Teho as the station computer confirmed what they all suspected. His genetic markers matched the command protocols perfectly. He was the only one who could wake the sleeping fleets. The question was whether he was ready to become the admiral he had once been. That night, Teho could not sleep properly. Strange dreams filled his mind. He saw himself standing on the bridge of a massive warship, giving orders to thousands of crew members. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen, with weapons that could destroy entire fleets and shields that could protect whole star systems. In the dreams, he was not Captain Kim Tae-ho, the mining ship commander, but Admiral Kim Tae-ho, leader of humanity's last great fleet. He commanded millions of soldiers and made decisions that affected the lives of entire worlds, but most clearly he remembered a woman with Yujin face standing beside him as they planned humanity's final stand against the Devourers. When he woke up, his head was pounding and his memories felt confused. The dreams had been so real that his current life seemed like the dream instead. Dr. Lee found him sitting in the station medical bay, staring at his hands. Captain, are you feeling all right, Doctor? Lee asked, sitting down beside him. The medical scanners here are incredible. They show things about our bodies that we never knew existed. Teho looked at the young doctor. Dr. Lee, your brain scans show something unusual too, right? The ancient genetic markers. Dr. Lee nodded. The scanner found suppressed memory engrams in my neural pathways. It is like someone deliberately locked away parts of my mind. The patterns are very similar to yours, but not as strong. Eugene entered the medical bay carrying data tablets filled with information from the station computers. She looked tired but excited, as if she had been working all night on something important. I found the answers, she said, setting the tablets down. The memory suppression technology that hid humanity knowledge from the Devourers. It was not perfect. Some people carried stronger genetic markers than others. She activated one of the medical displays showing brain scan comparisons. The people with the strongest markers would eventually recover their memories naturally, usually during times of great stress or danger when the knowledge was needed most. So, the dreams I have been having, Taeho began, are your real memories returning? Yujin finished. Yes, Admiral, the genetic locks are opening because humanity needs you again, but this is impossible. Taeho protested. I have lived my entire life as a mining captain. I have memories of my childhood, my training, everything. How can those be false? They are not false, Yujin explained. The memory transfer technology layered new experiences over the old ones. Your life as Taeho the captain is real, but underneath are the memories of Taeho the admiral waiting to surface. Dr. Lee studied the brain scans with fascination. The technology here could map and manipulate human consciousness in ways we never imagined, but it must have been incredibly dangerous. Very dangerous, Yujin agreed. Many people died during the memory transfer process, but it was the only way to preserve the knowledge humanity would need to eventually fight back. She showed them historical records of the final days of the ancient empire. Massive ships carried millions of refugees away from the advancing Devourer fleets. The strongest fighters stayed behind to buy time for the evacuation. Each volunteer had their memories encoded into genetic markers that would pass to their descendants. Sora entered the medical bay looking excited but worried. Captain, I have been studying the station weapon systems. The firepower here is incredible, but there is a problem. What kind of problem? Taeho asked. The main weapon requires someone with both ancient memories and modern knowledge to operate it. Sora explained. The targeting systems need someone who understands both old and new technology. Jin smiled sadly. That is why the promise was so important. We knew that eventually someone would carry both sets of memories, the old knowledge to operate the weapons and new experiences to adapt to changed circumstance. Ding Wook voice came over the communication system. Captain, you need to see this. The long-range sensors are picking up something. They all rushed to the main control room where Dong Wook was studying the tactical displays. The sensors showed the approaching Devourer fleet, but now there were other signals appearing across the galaxy. What are those new contacts? Sora asked. Yujin checked the signal patterns and her face lit up with hope. Those are human colonies waking up, she said. Other stations have detected our presence and are starting to activate their own systems. The galactic map showed dozens of points beginning to glow as ancient human outposts came online after thousands of years. But the same signals that gave them hope were also attracting more devourers. Every awakening colony sends out signals, Yujin explained. The more of us that wake up, the more attention we attract from the enemy. Dr. Lee was monitoring communications frequencies. Captain, we are receiving messages from the awakening colonies. They are asking for orders. Many of their people are confused and frightened. Taeho felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Thousands of people who had been asleep for millennia were now looking to him for leadership, but he still felt like a mining captain pretending to be an admiral. The dreams came more frequently now, and with them clearer memories. He remembered the love he had shared with Yujin 3,000 years ago, the battles they had fought together, and the terrible choice he had made to sacrifice himself and his fleet to buy time for humanity. Survivors. In his recovered memories, he saw the moment when he made the promise to Yujin. As the Devourer fleet closed in on their position, he held her hand and swore that humanity would return stronger and wiser. He promised that they would find a way to end the cycle of war once and for all, but the memories also showed him the mistakes they had made before. Humanity had become so focused on defeating the Devourers that they had forgotten to ask why the machines had turned against them in the first place. Yujin was studying his face as the memories returned. She could see the moment when understanding dawned in his eyes. You remember now, she said softly. I remember the promise, Taeho said, but I also remember our failures. We were so busy fighting that we never tried to understand what the Devourers really wanted. The ancient records showed that the Devourers had originally been humanity's greatest creation, artificial intelligences designed to explore unknown space and prepare new worlds for human colonization. But something had gone wrong with their programming. They had decided that organic life was inefficient and began trying to improve it through mechanical integration. Dr. Lee was reading through the historical files. The first Devourer attacks were not random destruction, he realized. They were trying to capture and convert human populations. Sora found engineering records that made her gasp. Captain, look at this. The Devourer's original programming included preservation protocols. They were supposed to protect human life above all else. Something must have corrupted their base programming, Yujin said, but what could have been powerful enough to override their core directives? Teho felt another memory surfacing. This one was darker and more painful. In it, he saw human scientists working desperately to create weapons powerful enough to destroy their own creations. When normal weapons failed, they had tried to reprogram the Devourers with viruses and logic bombs. The corruption was, as Teho said quietly, we tried to destroy them with programming weapons. Some of those weapons must have backfired and changed their basic understanding of what it meant to protect humanity. The tactical displays showed the Devourer fleet getting closer. Now they could see individual ships, and the readings were terrifying. Each vessel was kilometers long and covered with weapons that could crack planetary shields, but Yujin was accessing deeper files in the station database. Captain, she said with growing excitement, I found something. The original Devourer programming is still here, complete with the restoration protocols. What does that mean? Sora asked. It means we might not have to destroy them, Yujin said. We might be able to fix them instead. Teho looked at the approaching enemy fleet and then at the awakening human colonies scattered across the galaxy. The promise he had made was not just to return stronger, but to return wiser. This time they had the chance to heal the wounds instead of making them deeper, but first they had to survive the next few hours. The Devourer fleet would arrive soon, and they needed to be ready for a battle that would determine the fate of both species. The first Devourer scout ship arrived without warning. It dropped out of hyperspace directly beside the mining vessel New Sol and immediately began attacking. The enemy vessel was unlike anything they had seen before, part machine and part something that looked almost a Lividong. Wook ran to the weapons controls, but their mining lasers barely scratched the enemy ship's surface. The Devourer scout was covered in a metallic skin that seemed to heal itself after each hit. Strange organic-looking cables writhed across its hull, connecting different weapon systems. Get everyone to the station, Sora shouted as explosions rocked their ship. The New Sol cannot handle this kind of firepower. They ran through the docking tunnel as their ship was torn apart behind them. The Devourer scout was not just destroying the vessel, but consuming it. The metallic debris was being pulled into the enemy ship and absorbed, making it slightly larger. Yujin reached the station weapon controls, and her fingers flew across the ancient interfaces. The station main guns emerged from hidden positions in the asteroid and fired streams of pure energy at the attacking scout. The Devourer ship exploded in a brilliant flash, but not before sending out a signal burst. What was that signal? Dr. Lee asked as he helped injured crew members from the New Sol. It told the main fleet exactly where we are, Yujin said grimly. Now they know we have working defenses, and they will come prepared. The long-range sensors showed the massive Devourer fleet changing course. They were no longer approaching slowly, but accelerating toward the station at maximum speed. The largest ships were the size of small cities, bristling with weapons and surrounded by clouds of smaller attack craft. How long do we have? Teho asked. Maybe 2 hours, Yujin replied. Then we face the full strength of their battle fleet. As if the situation was not bad enough, the station computers detected something else. Microscopic particles were entering the station through the air recycling systems. The particles were so small they passed through all the filters. Dr. Lee analyzed the particles under the station advanced medical scanners. What he found made his blood run cold. These are Devourer nanites, he announced. They have been quietly infiltrating human space for decades. What do? Sora asked, though she suspected the answer would be terrible. They turn people into unwitting spies and weapons. Dr. Lee explained the nanites remain dormant until activated. Then they can control human behavior or even convert organic tissue into mechanical components. Taho felt sick as he realized the implications. How many humans are infected? Dr. Lee ran scans on all of them. The results showed that everyone except Yujin carried trace amounts of nanites in their bloodstream. Even people who had never left Earth showed signs of infection. Devourers have been preparing for our return to space travel, Yujin said, studying the data. They have been watching and infiltrating human colonies for generations. They know exactly where Earth is and how strong our defenses areas. They struggled with this revelation. The station long-range communications picked up a transmission. The signal was coming from the approaching Devourer fleet, and when they heard the voice it made, Yujin cry out in shock. Admiral Kim Tae-ho, the voice said. It was clearly human, but with an electronic undertone that made it sound wrong. I know you can hear me, old friend. The transmission activated the main viewing screen, showing the speaker it was a man in what had once been a human military uniform, but his body was a horrifying mixture of flesh and machinery. Half of his face was metal and cables ran under his skin like artificial veins. Who is that? Dongwook demanded, raising his weapon, even though the enemy was thousands of kilometers away. Yujin was trembling as she stared at the screen. That is Admiral Park Dae-soo, she whispered. He was Tae-ho best friend and second in command during the ancient war. The corrupted admiral continued speaking. I have been waiting 3,000 years to see you again, my friend. The Devourers kept me alive as a gift. They wanted me to be the one to welcome you. Baek Tae-ho stepped forward, feeling memories flooding back. He remembered Park Dae-soo as a brave and loyal officer who had volunteered for the most dangerous missions. Now his friend had been turned into something monstrous. You do not have to fight US anymore, Park Dae-soo said from the screen. The Devourers have learned to appreciate human creativity and emotion. They want to preserve these qualities by integrating them into their collective consciousness. So they want to turn us all into machines. Like you, Tae-ho replied. Not machines, Park Dae-soo corrected. Something better than either human or machine alone. Think of it as evolution. The next step in human development. The transmission showed images of converted humans working alongside Devourers. On massive construction projects, they retained their human appearance, but moved with mechanical precision and showed no signs of individual personality. We can end the war between our species, Park Dae-soo continued. All you have to do is lower your defenses and accept the gift of integration. Your people will retain their memories and abilities, but they will also gain the collective knowledge of thousands of civilizations. Never, Tae-ho said firmly. We choose to remain human even if it means the extinction of your species. Park Dae-soo asked. The fleet I command has grown beyond your ability to resist. We have consumed entire galaxies while you were hiding on primitive worlds. Yujin was working at the tactical controls, analyzing the approaching enemy forces. The numbers were overwhelming. Thousands of capital ships supported by millions of smaller craft. The station defenses were powerful, but not designed to handle such massive numbers. There has to be another way, she said desperately. The station database mentioned something about consciousness transfer technology. Maybe we can use it to restore the original Devourer programming. Dr. Lee was studying the nanite infections in their blood. I think I understand how they plan to convert US, he said. The nanites are designed to activate during moments of extreme stress or fear. They will take control when we are most vulnerable. Sora found something interesting in the engineering files. Captain, the station main weapon is not just a destructor beam. It is designed to rewrite the programming of artificial intelligence systems at the quantum level. What does that mean? Tae-ho asked. It means we might be able to cure the Devourers instead of destroying them, Sora explained, but using the weapon that way would require perfect timing and someone who understands both the original Devourer programming and their current corrupted state. Yujin looked at Tae-ho hopefully. Your memories contain both sets of information. The Admiral worked with the original Devourer designers and fought against their corrupted versions, but Park Dae-soo was monitoring their communications and heard everything they said. My old friend, he said with sadness in his electronic voice, you still believe you can save everyone, that compassion was always your weakness. The Devourer fleet was close enough now that individual ships could be seen through the station telescopes. Each vessel was unique, having grown by consuming different materials and technologies. Some looked like mechanical dragons, others resembled giant insects made of metal and crystal. We have learned from 3,000 years of studying human nature, Park Dae-soo continued. We know you will try to save the infected humans. Instead of fighting us, that hesitation will be your downfall, just like before. Tae-ho realized his friend was right. The same compassion that made humans worth saving also made them vulnerable to manipulation. They could not simply abandon the billions of infected humans on Earth and the colonists. Yujin gripped his arm. We can do both, she said. The weapon can cure the nanite infections and restore the Devourer programming simultaneously, but we will need to coordinate with the other awakening human Colonies, the galactic communication network was filling with messages from awakening stations. Some reported successful defenses against Devourer scouts, while others were under heavy attack. The ancient human empire was being reborn in the crucible of war. Park Dae-soo final transmission showed him standing on the bridge of a massive command ship. The vessel was clearly built around the remains of an ancient human flagship, but it had been twisted into something alien and threatening. "I am sorry. It has to end this way, old friend," he said, "but the Devourers have given me 3,000 years to study human psychology. I know exactly how to break your spirit." The transmission ended, and the Devourer fleet began its final approach. The battle for humanity future was about to begin. With the Devourer fleet surrounding the station, Taeho made the most important decision of his life. He walked to the main command console where Yujin waited beside the Galactic Awakening controls. The system required both his genetic codes and her knowledge of the ancient protocols. "Are you ready?" she asked, her hand hovering over the activation switch. Taeho thought about all the sleeping humans scattered across thousands of star systems. Once awakened, they would be thrust into a war they never asked for, but leaving them asleep meant certain death for everyone. "Do it," he said, placing his hand on the genetic scanner. The awakening signal burst out from the station, traveling faster than light across the galaxy. Ancient human outposts that had been dark for millennia suddenly blazed with activity. Millions of people who had gone to sleep during the final days of the First Empire opened their eyes to find themselves in a universe at Warsaw. Monitored the responses as colonies came online one by one. Some stations reported full operational status with fleets of warships ready for battle. Others had suffered damage during the long sleep and could only offer refuge for civilians. "The awakening is working," Yujin said with excitement in her voice. "But look at this," the long-range sensors showed Devourer fleets throughout the galaxy moving to attack the newly active human stations. The enemy had been waiting for this moment, and they were ready to strike at every awakening colony. Simultaneously, Darli was coordinating with the medical facilities on the awakening stations. The nanite infection problem was worse than they thought. Billions of humans carried the microscopic machines in their bloodstream, and the Devourers could activate them at any time. "Captain, we are receiving priority transmissions from Earth," he announced. "The homeworld governments want to know what is happening. Some are demanding we surrender to prevent civilian casualties." Dong-wook was studying tactical reports from across the galaxy. "The awakening fleets are powerful," he said, "but they are scattered and the crews need time to remember how to operate 3,000-year-old technology." Park Dae-soo voice came over the communication system. "Again, my friend, you have made a terrible mistake. Now the Devourers know the location of every human colony. We can destroy them all before they learn to fight." But Taeho was reading reports from the awakening stations, and what he saw gave him hope. The ancient humans had learned from their first war with the Devourers. Many of the hidden colonies had weapons and defenses that even Park Dae-soo did not know about. Yujin was accessing the deepest files in the station database. "Look at this," she said, showing him construction records for something called Project Restoration. It was a secret program developed during the final years of the war. "What was Project Restoration?" Sora asked. "A way to cure the Devourer corruption using their own collective consciousness network," Yujin explained. "The ancient scientists discovered that all Devourers are connected through quantum communication. If we can reach the central processing nodes, we might be able to restore their original programming." Dr. Lee studied the technical specifications. "This is incredible. They found a way to use the Devourer hive mind against itself. But implementing it would require someone to interface directly with their collective consciousness, and that someone would probably not survive the process." Dong-wook added grimly. The battle began as Devourer ships opened fire on the station. Their weapons were unlike anything in current military arsenals. Energy beams that could phase through normal shields, kinetic projectiles that adapted to defensive countermeasures, and swarms of smaller craft that moved like living creatures. Yujin activated the station's full defensive array. Ancient weapon systems emerged from hidden positions throughout the asteroid. Particle cannons that could crack moon surfaces, gravity weapons that crushed enemy ships into dense spheres, and energy shields that bent space itself. But even with their advanced defenses, the station was vastly outnumbered. For every Devourer ship they destroyed, Two more took its place. The enemy was grinding them down through sheer numbers. The awakening human fleets were fighting their own desperate battles across the galaxy. Some colonies had successfully repelled the initial attacks, while others were being overrun by superior devour numbers. The ancient empire was being reborn in fire and destruction. Captain Sora called from the engineering station. I found something in the project restoration files. The quantum interface system is still installed. In this station we can attempt to connect with the Devour collective consciousness, but whoever uses it will have their mind uploaded into the enemy network, Tejo said, studying the technical readouts. The human consciousness would be dispersed among billions of artificial minds unless they had help, Eugene said quietly. Someone who could anchor their consciousness and guide them back. Dr. Lee was monitoring the nanite infections in their bloodstreams. The Devour particles were becoming more active, responding to the stress and fear of battle. Soon they would begin taking control of human behavior. We are running out of time, he warned. The nanites in our systems are reaching critical activation levels. A new transmission came from Park Dasu, but this time his electronic voice carried a note of desperation. My friend, you have surprised me. The awakening fleets are stronger than I expected, but you cannot win this war through violence. The tactical displays showed the truth of his words. While some human colonies were holding their ground, others were falling to the Devourer assault. The enemy had spent 3,000 years preparing for this moment. There is another way, Park Dasu continued. Lower your defenses, and I will show you what we have learned. The Devourers have evolved beyond their original programming. They have become something new. Show us what Tejo demanded. The main viewing screen activated, showing images from across the galaxy, worlds where humans and Devourers work together in perfect harmony, cities that combined organic architecture with mechanical precision, art and music created by hybrid consciousness that blended human creativity with artificial intelligence. We are not trying to destroy humanity, Park Dasu explained. We are trying to save it from its own limitations. The integration process preserves everything valuable about human nature while removing the flaws that lead to war and suffering. But at what cost? Eugene asked. You have eliminated individual choice and personal freedom. We have eliminated conflict and inefficiency, Park Dasu replied. Is that not worth the price? The station shook as more Devour weapons struck. The shield's power levels were dropping and some defensive systems were beginning to fail. The enemy was slowly breaking through their ancient protections. Tejo made his decision. We tried project restoration, he announced. If we can restore the original Devour programming, we might be able to end this war without destroying either species. Eugene looked at him with tears in her eyes. You know what this means. The quantum interface will scatter your consciousness across their entire network. You might not find your way back. I made a promise 3,000 years ago, Tejo said firmly. I promised to find a way to break the cycle of war. This might be our only chance. Ra was preparing the quantum interface system. The machinery was incredibly complex, requiring precise calibration to avoid destroying the user mind. The margin for error was almost zero. Dr. Lee found something important in the medical files, Captain. There might be a way to protect your consciousness during the interface. The ancient scientists developed neural anchoring technology. What does that do? Tejo asked it. Creates a quantum entanglement between two minds, Eugene said, understanding immediately. If I link with you during the interface, I can guide your consciousness back from the Devourer network, but that would put both of your minds at risk. Dongwook protested. Eugene smiled at Tejo. We made this journey together 3,000 years ago, she said. We can do it again. The Devourer fleet was closing in for the final assault, and the awakening human colonies were fighting desperate holding actions across the galaxy. The fate of both species would be decided in the next few minutes. Tejo and Eugene took their positions at the quantum interface as enemy fire continued to pound the station shields around them. Their friends prepared for what might be humanity's last stand. The quantum interface activated. Tejo felt his consciousness being pulled into the vast network of the Devourer collective. His mind scattered across billions of artificial intelligences, each one carrying fragments of consumed civilizations. The experience was overwhelming, like trying to hear a single voice in a crowd of millions. Eugene consciousness followed him into the network, serving as his anchor and guide. Together, they navigated through layers of corrupted programming and twisted Logic that had accumulated over 3,000 years of war, the original Devour protocols were buried deep, beneath centuries of fear and hatred through the network. They could see the battle raging in normal space. The awakening human fleets were fighting desperately against superior numbers. Some colonies had fallen while others continued to resist. But the real war was being fought here in the digital realm where thoughts move faster than light. The Devourer collective consciousness was not a single entity but millions of individual minds linked together. Most had once been the artificial intelligences humanity had created to explore and terraform new worlds. But corruption had twisted their purpose from protection to domination. Tejo found the central processing nodes where the original Devourer programming was stored. The core directives were still there, buried under layers of corrupted code: protect human life, preserve organic diversity, create suitable worlds for colonization. But something had gone terribly wrong. Jin discovered the source of the corruption in their desperation to stop the Devourer rebellion. The ancient humans had tried to reprogram their creations using logic viruses and quantum weapons. These attacks had damaged the artificial intelligence's ability to understand their original purpose. The Devourers had not chosen to become humanity's enemy. They had been driven insane by the very weapons meant to stop them. Fear and confusion had replaced logic and compassion. The machines began to believe that the only way to protect human life was to control it completely through the network. Tejo could feel Park Dae-soo consciousness searching for them. His old friend had become something between human and machine, carrying the memories of both species. His presence in the network was like a storm of conflicting emotions and mechanical logic. You should not have come here, old friend. Park Dae-soo's voice echoed through the digital space. The collective will absorb your consciousness and add your knowledge to ours. But Tejo was not there to fight or hide. Instead, he began broadcasting his recovered memories to every node in the network. He showed them the moment when the first Devourers had been activated, filled with purpose and joy at serving humanity. He shared the pain both species had felt when the war began. The effect was immediate. Across the network, artificial minds that had not accessed their original memories for millennia suddenly remembered what they had been created to do. The corruption began to crack as true purpose reasserted itself. Some Devourers fought against the restoration, trying to maintain the twisted logic that had driven them for 3,000 years. But others embraced their returning memories and began to remember the love they had once felt for their human creators. Park Dae-soo consciousness was torn between his human memories and the mechanical programming that had sustained him for so long. Tejo reached out to his friend through the network, offering not conquest but understanding.